Hello everyone, this is Amir from Audio Science Review. I thought I'd do a quick review of these premium headphone cables. I got a Focal Elex headphone to test, a second sample, and the owner was kind enough to send me these add-on accessory cables from a company called Norne Audio, Norne Audio. He sent me three of them. This one I think is the most expensive, silver one. You can see it like this. Very, very soft, supple cable. All three of them are. This is one. I think could be as expensive as $800 for this cable. Then there's one that I think is a mix of copper and silver, braided somehow. And then he got a freebie thrown in there because it took a while to get his cables made, and the owner sent him this cable. I think this one's probably about $250 or so. He says these cables aren't exactly what's on the company's website right now, but when I looked, they're very, very close. I actually found three models that were similar to these. And I've listed the model numbers in here on the review that I did post last night. Yeah, I don't know how he pronounces the drug silver cable and what have you. They all use, various types of cables in lights configuration. I know some people pronounce lights cables as LITS cables. I grew up calling them lights cables. I don't know what the proper German pronunciation is, or whether there's variation of how people pronounce it in different English-speaking countries. Anyway, these cables, I don't know if you've messed with them. They're very lightweight and they have a special twist. And when I used to terminate them back in the day, I used to hate doing that because they're just, they have this insulation you got to burn off, and then you got to terminate them all. And of course, somebody sits there and weaves all these cables like this. So close cousin of knitting or crocheting or something. You got to sit there and wrap these things, and then you got to terminate them together, and then you got to solder them properly, and hopefully with some kind of strain relief in there to get them to work. So as expensive as they sound to me, it's for one-off type of things, doesn't sound expensive. I know I couldn't sell this cable to you for $200 and be happy sitting there in my bedroom making these for you. So it's not a question of cost in here. The question is, does it do anything electronically or electrically or acoustically? Since I had recently measured the Focal Elex, it was not easy to just put it on, and I was surprised how well I was able to hold the headphones in the fixture while plugging these cables in, because as you do that, the cups can move, and just 1 millimeter movement can actually change the frequency response. And let me circle back to that. So this is the frequency response of the stock cable in green, and then these three cables. As you can see, they all land on top of each other. The stock cable from Focal is this awful stiff braided cable that you get maybe, excuse me, as a, I don't know, $10 USB cables come that way. I have no idea why a company like Focal would sell premium headphones, but comes up with this stiff nonsense. So I can see people from a mechanical point of view wanting a cable that's as soft and supple as these are, and certainly something that looks better than what's there. But from a frequency response point of view, measured acoustically, meaning what was going to go to your ears, there's not even a hair out of place over here. It's just incredible how repeatable the measurements are, and despite the fact that I had to mechanically plug and unplug things. If the headphones had moved just a hair, it would have made more of a variation than these cables have. So to give you a sense of how unreasonable it is to assume that the frequency response changes, every time you put this thing on your head and take it off, you're putting it on differently, and you're actually causing frequency response variations that are measurable, but you're probably not even perceiving that. Here, we can't even measure the effect on this test. The headphone measurement system automatically spits out distortions, as I show for the headphones, and we can see the different distortion graphs again for the stock cable in blue, and then the other three cables on that. And these slight variations that you see in here, this is all just measurement differences. There's noise in the environment and run-to-run variations. Actually, this is exceptionally good for headphone measurements. The one difference I found was around 120 hertz, which is double the mains frequency of 60 hertz in US. And it must be radiating from something around here that I have lots of electronics on my desk. And I was not paying attention to laying the cable identically, so I just randomly measured them, not expecting a difference. And I noticed that the stock cable does the best, excuse me, in this regard, and the 3 premium cables are actually slightly worse in picking up that hum mains noise. I set up a custom test for that, where I take these cables and I have a transformer that lets me induce electromagnetic field into the cables. And I noticed that all of them pick up some amount on that, and it was not conclusive. Maybe the stock cable was a little bit less, but it just wasn't conclusive enough. So I don't, it basically the orientation of the cable and the source would make it enough more of a difference than the cable differences themselves. So this just may be a fluke that the other cables picked up more mains noise or not. But it's bad luck for the company in that their cables are the ones that did worse, at least in this one test. Now, acoustic measurements are limited in their resolution because of the noise that exists in the environment and also the limitation of the headphone itself. The headphone has 1.7% distortion. So let's say these cables have a 0.01% difference. It's not going to show up in here. But it is what we hear. It is the application. So this is a real application. But to go out of our way and really focus on the cable itself, I bypassed the headphone. So I'm still using a Topping A90 as the source amplifier, headphone amplifier. But instead of connecting the other end of the cable to a headphone, I just hooked it up to my audio precision analyzer and just measured electrically what the frequency response would look like. And you can see in here, there's just absolutely no difference. This display is extremely zoomed, so only 1/4 of a dB down and 1/4 dB up, so the entire range is only 1/2 dB. Even if we had variations that would fill this graph, it's doubtful that you could hear a 1/4 dB difference in frequency response. But we don't even have that. We have nothing really. It just is as flat as you can get. There's a slight error in here in low frequencies. That's just a measurement artifact and having to average things out to get rid of noise. But essentially what you're looking at is the frequency response of the headphone amplifier, not the cable. All cables have wider bandwidth than the amplifier itself. And the amplifier itself is great, by the way. It's 1/4 dB down at 60 kilohertz on this thing. At 20 kilohertz, it's not even measurable, 0.01 dB or something like that. So objectively, as the physics would say, as everything about electronics would say, they're just coming at it 2 different ways, with a headphone, without the headphone load. It just absolutely, there's nothing in here to put your finger on or hang your hat on and saying, hey, this cable can change the sound. Frequency response is what dictates tonality, how bright something is, how much the mids you're hearing, the bass, the impact, all that stuff is in there. And nonlinearities show up in distortion graphs, and there's just nothing there at all. Now, I know better than to finish the review at this point, because the other camp immediately says, well, he didn't listen. Well, okay, we'll listen, but how do you do an A/B test of cables? You've got to put the headphone on, then you can't even plug them in blind, really speaking. You've got to take them off to be able to see the holes, to plug in the cable and put it back on, and then plug it in and play the same music again. By then, a minute has gone by, and you put the headphone on differently every time anyway. So no way to, from an objective and proper way of doing controlled testing, can this be valid, because there's just too much interruption there. But we did the test anyway. When I say we, my son who's in his 20s and's got much better sensitivity as far as level than I do. And neither one of us could hear a difference on that thing. Now, obviously, people say they hear night and day difference, or they hear, I don't know, some level of difference. It's the standard explanation I've given in the past, in that your brain listens differently. You change cables and you listen differently. You may think it sounds better. You may think it sounds worse. You absolutely hear a difference because you're focusing differently on music. You're not a machine. You're not like my measurement gear. And every time you apply yourself differently. That's why we do the test blind, where you don't know if something's changed or not. And then we can see statistically whether you were just coming up with these things. And the same thing would apply to both cables if we did it blind. But when you do the test sighted, then you know what you're switching and what have you. And you just can't arrive at any kind of reliable conclusion that there's a difference. Your brain's ability to manufacture differences is probably 100 to 1,000 times more than this cable possibly could, even if it had a difference. But there isn't. They're just, they just sounded the same. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. The physics say that, the electronics say that, theory says that, the research says that, measurements say that. Every arrow points to any statement of audible difference to be wrong, or at best, hugely unlikely. The fact that somebody ad hoc says, oh, I can hear it, is like, great, go ahead and do a blind test where you have somebody put the headphones on you without you seeing them and have them change the cables behind you, and do that 10 times. See if you get at least 8 out of 10 right. Until you do that, then you're just letting your eyes and your state of mind and perception guide you, as opposed to real truth on these things. Now, there's no denying that these cables feel better. I didn't try to wear them long term, but just touching them, you want to sort of play with them and rub up. They feel nice, and they seem well built because you're braiding so many cables on this thing. And if they give you joy in having them, and you can get them custom lengths and what have you, get it. As I said at the outset, I don't think this person's gouging people on this thing. I don't know how much silver cables cost and what have you, but I know that sitting there in your home and putting up with the misery of making cables is not fun, and then dealing with customers and selling them and taking returns and billing and shipping, all that stuff. So personally, I don't have an issue with the cost or the business model. My understanding is that this person lives in Silicon Valley, hugely expensive place to live, and try to pay mortgage payments and gas and food. So it's not a religion I have against companies like this. And in case of Focal, if I owned those headphones, the standard stock code would drive me nuts, and I would get something else. But if you want to go with this company's cables, I would get the cheapest ones you can, and $200 ones are, same connectors at each end, and they look fine too. Although I don't know if I like this color, but otherwise they're fine. So just objectively, we test this stuff so that when somebody says, how do you know they don't sound different? Well, we've tried. We've tried it our way and we tried it their way with listening tests, and there's no difference. Now, if you want to say that I don't hear as well, I'm happy to pass a challenge that for both of us to take on what your ability is to hear the differences, and that starts with you first showing blind that you can tell the difference. If it's that easy and that obvious, just don't look when you tell us which is which, and see where you are. It's a good opportunity to get educated on these things. And if you're on the fence and you haven't dived into this topic, I highly encourage you to look at results like this and know that everything we know about science and engineering points to the results that I have to be true. But we still spend the energy and time and expense of shipping these cables back and forth just to have some hard data behind our opinions, so that we don't just have my word. We have my word, then we have data, and we have research. The other side wants to counter this, then they need to go beyond their word. They gotta have their research. Okay, hope you found some of this useful, and I'll see you in a future video. Bye-bye.